So let's sit up nice and tall and close the eyes. And closing the eyes, just allow yourself to remember all the blessings that have been bestowed upon you in this life, beginning with the blessing of life, being alive, even if you're a little chilly in this moment. And allow the remembrance to lead to a deep gratitude that warms the heart, warms the body, warms the mind, and allows a gentle softness to come over your being. An acceptance, a humbleness. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart, we'll begin our session with one communal Om. Take a nice breath in. And bowing the head toward the heart, acknowledging all that is. And drawing the face to center, release the hands. So today's talk is on the foundational principle of yoga, ahimsa. And we'll see how far this goes. It may lead into the first 4 Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, or it might not. For the yoga teacher trainees in the room, we may pick that conversation up a little bit later. But I want to start the conversation on ahimsa, or nonviolence, with a story. So there was a criminal, and he was a murderer, and he was thought to have murdered at least 999 people. And he caused a lot of fear in society. And the Buddha heard about him. And when he was told the story, he said to the person telling him the story, "Do you know how I can get a hold of this person? Like, where can I find him?" And the person said, "Oh, you don't want to do that, Buddha." Well, word got around that the Buddha was looking for this murderer, and so the murderer began looking for the Buddha. And the Buddha made himself accessible. He was in a grove of trees, and the murderer saw him. And the Buddha was walking very calmly and very gently through this field, through this grove, rather. And the murderer began to run after the Buddha, and the Buddha just walked. And no matter how fast the murderer ran, with a knife in hand, intending to kill the Buddha and then cut off his fingers and add them to the necklace of fingers that he was already wearing. His name was Angimata, or Anguti Mala. That's it, Anguti Mala, the one who wears the fingers of those he killed. But no matter how fast he ran, the Buddha never ran, he just kept walking, but the distance grew and grew and grew between them. Finally, Angati screams. He says, "Buddha, stop!" And Buddha says, let me quote this so that I get it correct. Buddha said to him, "I have stopped. You are the one who continues running." Having heard that, Angi Mala falls down to the ground at the Buddha's feet and requests to be ordained a monk, and says he wants to live the rest of his life in nonviolence. And the Buddha said, "Yes, absolutely." Takes him under his wing. And he says, So you'll live the rest of your life in nonviolence. But what will probably happen is that as you walk through the world, you'll come upon family members and loved ones of the people that you killed. And they don't understand nonviolence. And the consequence of your own actions will necessitate that they attack you, the ones who are so called to do, and you must receive that, because that's a consequence of your action. And so he did. Whenever he was walking through the villages and he came across a family member of someone who he harmed, he made himself accessible, just as the Buddha made himself accessible. And as a result of that, he was beaten many times. But the key there is that although he received these beatings, which were consequences of his own actions, he never harbored hatred. He never harbored ill will. He simply received what he understood to belong to him. And his life went on, and he became a great activist of peace. The moral of this story, there are many, but the particular moral of the story is to always remember that no one is beyond redemption. Violence does not end violence. It is not possible. And every time we think it is, we're greatly mistaken and investing in the incorrect energy. That we need to, in our own lives, allow ourselves to accept responsibility for what belongs to us, not accept responsibility for what does not, and then continue on with a mindset of kindness, a mindset of no intention to harm, no intention to kill, no intention to commit atrocity, no intention for vengeance, no intention for hatred, no intention for showing others are wrong and we're correct, no intention of that type of ego, which always ends in someone being harmed. I'll read you another quote. The Indian peace activist Satish Kumar wrote, "The real challenge is to talk to those who are violent, talk to those who disagree, those who oppose and who intend harm. External violence is only a symptom, a manifestation of some deeper cause. Only in dialogue can the perpetrators of violence and the victims of violence discover its root cause and find ways to heal that discord. That's the only way, through conversation, through unity, through honest dialogue. We should not hate someone who creates our suffering. We can obviously object and disagree with this action, but we should view them and all beings as redeemable. It's only when we truly see the value in every single person that we meet that we truly come into a place of unconditional love and acceptance. Think back to when you were in school. For some, it's not too long ago. For others, it may be a while. But think back about the bullies that were in school. The people who run around pushing kids into lockers and calling people names. My grandson experienced this just recently. He started school at a new school. They just moved here from New Hampshire. And there was a boy who was bullying him. And we talked about it, and I said to him, well, you know, typically when a person acts violently, they're learning that behavior someplace else in their life. And they don't understand, on some level of their being, that to harm others is to cause others to feel as badly as they feel when it is done to them. I said, so next time this boy bullies you, ask him why he does it. Ask him, where did you learn this behavior from? And see what he says. My grandson came to me not too long after that, and he said, he's bullied after school in his other program. And that's where he learned this behavior from. So if we ourselves become the bullies, if we ourselves murder the murderer, if we ourselves condemn the ones who are consistently erring on the side of violence, then the violence won't stop. There's another story of two kings. One king had a huge kingdom and very strong armies. The other king had a small kingdom and humble armies. They were good friends, but had a disagreement. The disagreement grew, and the king with the grand kingdom and the huge armies decided that he was going to obliterate the other king. Having got word of this, the smaller of the two kings went to his queen and said, "We must take our son and go hide. That way, our son's life will be spared, and so will ours. It won't do the king any good to kill us. It will only create further discord." The queen agreed, and they went and they hid in the city of now I can't think of it. Barnese? Now, it was the center of the king's kingdom, the great king's kingdom. And so the smaller of the two kings said, well, he will never even think to look for us here. So they lived there, and he disguised himself as a holy man, and he begged for alms in order to feed his family. And years went by, and his son, the prince, grew into a young man. One day, a man was going through the town who used to be an aide to the smaller of the two kings. He saw him, and he recognized him, and he was now an aide to the other king, who never stopped looking, who never stopped being verklempt about the fact that this king escaped his grip. So this individual goes off to this bigger king and says, I found him. He's actually hiding in your kingdom, dressed as a holy person, begging for alms. His queen is still alive, and his son has grown into a young man. The king calls all of his armies and says to them, go find him and bring the whole family to me so that they can be killed. The lesser of the two kings gets wind of this and says to his queen, we need to send our son away. We will stay, but we'll send our son to live elsewhere. So they send the son off to live with someone who the other king doesn't know. The king comes and finds this other king and his wife, brings them into the center of town, and keeps them in a cage. It just so happens that on this one day that the king decides to kill them, the son is coming for a visit. And he sees that this king is parading his parents around in this cart that is dressed up like a jail cell and having them belittled by the town folk and by himself as well. You know, the king is condemning them and calling them names and whatnot. And he says, I'm going to travel them out to the outskirts of town and kill them by sword and let them be the food for beasts and birds of prey. We will not give them a funerary pyre like would typically happen to royalty. This is how we will disdain their name. The son sees his parents being paraded around and becomes irate. The father sees the son and starts to sing so as not to give away the son's identity. Be not short-sighted, be not long-sighted. Not by violence is violence ended. Violence is only ended by non-violence. The king and his queen are paraded outside of town. They're put to death by the sword, and they're left laying there, guarded by guards, so that the bodies won't be disturbed except by beasts and birds of prey. Well, the son first says to himself, I must save the honor of my father and mother. And he goes and he gives the guards some alcohol and gets them drunk, and they pass out. And while they passed out, he burns the bodies on a pyre. The king happens to be walking around and sees from a distance that there's a fire happening there and that there's a person circumambulating the bodies, and realizes it must be the son. So he takes his armies over to go and capture the son and kill him, but by the time he gets there, he's gone. Years pass. The king, still looking for this child, who is now a young man, still so taken by the idea that he escaped his grip, verklempt with anger, irritation, hatred, spends a lot of time and resources looking for this person, who ends up being a stable hand in the king's horse stable. He's also quite the singer. And one day the king feels like being sung to. And they bring the prince. And the prince starts to sing. And the king is very taken with his voice and says, I want you to stay and be my singer. He says, okay. From there, the prince becomes trusted by the king over time and becomes an aide to the king. And one day they're going out on a journey to go on a hunt. And the prince thinks, well, this is a very wonderful opportunity. I'll simply separate us from the rest of the caravan on the hunt, and when the opportune time comes, I'll draw my sword and I'll kill the king and reclaim the honor of my parents. So he starts this plan. He separates the king out. They've been riding for some time, and the king says, I'm tired. Let's stop and rest. And so he says, okay. So the king lies down, and he's resting his head on the lap of the aide, and the aide is singing to him, and the king falls asleep. And the aide very quietly begins to draw his sword. And as he draws the sword, he hears the song of his father. Do not be short-sighted. Do not be long-sighted. Violence will never be ended by violence. Violence will only ever be ended by non-violence. He put the sword very quietly back into its sheath, and as he did, the king stirred, awakened by a dream. And in the dream, he felt that he was going to be murdered. He recognized that the boy was this other king's son. And the prince became irate and said to him, you killed my parents. I did come here to kill you. I came here to kill you, but then I heard my father's words. And the king said, I've been baffled by those words for years, since your father uttered them. It's like, what did he mean? Don't be short-sighted. Don't be long-sighted. Violence will never end violence. Only non-violence will end violence. And he said, don't be short-sighted in thinking that you are the only one who is correct in any given situation. Because there's always a multitude of sides to everything. And if you change the place from which you're looking, you'll see more than just your side. And you'll understand that anger has many facets, and so does forgiveness. He said, don't be long-sighted in holding grudges. Don't take grudges from today and carry them 25 years into the future, because all you're asking for there is a short life that is defined by the anger that you feel. When he said violence will never be ended by violence, what he was saying was, if I went through with it today and killed you, then your AIDS would kill me. And then my family would kill your AIDS. And then so forth and so on. And it just would have gone on forever. Only nonviolence will end nonviolence. So you have given me my life in this moment, and I will give you your life, and the violence will end. And the king, so inspired, impressed, awed, and humbled by the prince's wisdom, fell to his feet and said, there will never be violence between us again. Never. It will end now. And he was so taken by the words of the prince's father and by the prince's explanation that he gave the prince back his kingdom, gave him back his armies, gave him back everything, and lived the rest of his life in recognition of the violence he had committed and the promise to never commit it again. So only through communication, through conversation, through discussion, through an understanding that your life is just as valid and valuable as mine, and their life is just as valuable and valid as ours, will we ever come to understand how to end violence. We can have the greatest nuclear arsenal, the biggest armies in the world. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be a bigger bully on the block. Always. Because the human ego is such that it is always looking to better something else. So there will always be scheming. There will always be attempts to be the bigger bully, to be the stronger, more violent one. So the only way to stop that is to not be that. Period. So when we look at our own lives and we ask ourselves, how do I live nonviolently? I'm called to spirituality, but where is it written that spirituality means nonviolence? Well, it's not necessarily, it is written, but it's not written about spirituality per se. Spirituality is a modern term. It is a modern term that chose somewhere along its way to embody the principles of 4 traditions that have come from India: Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, and Buddhism, all 4 of which have as their foundational principle nonviolence. They have other principles too, but that's the primary principle. And when you come down to it, even the larger traditions in the world, the more organized religions like Catholicism, Christianity, have in some way, shape, or form, in a foundational statement by the name that they accept as the primary name: harm none, love all, love thy neighbor as thy brother. Yeah? So even in the spirituality, the more spiritually recognized traditions, which could be seen as being less organized, though that's not necessarily always true, and the larger, more organized religions of the world teach the same thing. They all teach nonviolence, non-harming, don't murder, don't take what doesn't belong to you, don't lie, don't grasp after what does not belong to you. Why? Why not? What's up? Why can't I kill, maim, destroy, take what I want? Because it hurts people. And because people who have been hurt become angry, hurtful people. And that's not to say that the victim becomes the perpetrator. It is to say that the victim will never find peace because of the harm that has been committed to them. And a person who cannot find peace is inevitably a harmful person to themselves and to anyone else who comes in their path. Being a survivor of violent assault myself, I get really pissed when people say an individual has been assaulted will become an assaulting individual themselves, because that's not true. But what I can say is that the person in my own life who I have been abusive to is me. And so being abusive to myself in my younger life led me away from learning how to love genuinely, and led me into a mode of hiding who I am, not even believing there was goodness inside. And I'm so grateful every day that the yoga uncovered and caused remembrance, allowed me to recognize that what happened to me was something that happened. It is not what I'm defined by. I'm the author of my own story, not anybody else. Not anybody else. And if I want my story to be one of harm and violence, then I'm quite capable of doing that. But I'm not going to find love, and I'm not going to find happiness, and I'm not going to find joy, and of all things, I am not going to find peace if I am busy committing violence. So a day came, and I remember it very vividly. I literally sat up from being asleep, woke up, sat up, and in my head was a voice, which was not mine. And it said, "Get out of here. Change your life. If you stay, you'll die, and you're not meant to." And I stood up, and I put a couple of things in a bag, and I walked that way. And I never turned back again. And in that moment, the first phone call that I made was to a counselor. And the second phone call that I made was to someone I had not spoken with in a long time who lived far away, to see if I could stay with them for a while. And I never turned back. For some people, it's not quite so clear, that voice in the head. For me, it was very clear. It was like someone smacked me on the back of my head and said, "Go." And I didn't really have a choice but to listen. So, because the message was really super clear. Violence will only beget violence. And if you stay, then you'll die, and you're not supposed to. Not by violence. Of course the time will come when I die, everybody dies. But let death, instead of being an act of violence, let death be an act of healing. Let it be peaceful. Let it be the recognition of a life lived in peace, a life lived in love, not a life lived in fear. So many stories about nonviolence. So many amazing examples that we can talk about. But really, the simple, practical application of nonviolence is stop hating and hurting people. Just stop it. That's the only way, is if you choose to stop it in whatever form it takes for you. It has to be you. It really doesn't matter. We can sit here and say, but all these people out in the world, they're hurting people right and left, Let the president of the country, for God's sake, and what he's doing. That's not an excuse for poor behavior. What somebody else is doing is not an excuse for our poor behavior. It is a reason for our good behavior. And it is a reason for our kindness. And it is a reason for us to adhere even more to not harming. Because we can see very clearly, no matter what side of the line you fall on, it doesn't matter to me what party you adhere to, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whoever. It does not require wide open eyes to see violence where violence exists. It does not take a person to be a Democrat or a liberal to see where harm is committed, where a child is crying. And it does not take a genius to understand that where there is a child who is being harmed, there is an adult in the making. And if the child is not taught kindness, equanimity, peace, joy, contentment, then how the hell are they ever going to know those things? We are creating the world we live in. So it is up to us to be the qualities that we want to see in the world. And to acknowledge and recognize that even though there are people out there who are committing atrocities every single day, that they will not stop committing those atrocities as long as atrocities are being committed to them. And I'll just give you an example. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't remember. Sometime, I think, right after the election and the current president gained office, an artist who has every right to express themselves in whatever artistic way they wish to, made a statue, a nude statue of the president. And in all major cities in the nation, like 12 major cities or something, put this statue, this nude statue, on corners where people could walk up, take their picture with it, you know. And on the face of it, it's like, no big deal. And really, it's not a big deal. It's an artist's impression, and he's got every right, or she's got, I don't know who it was, but that person has every right to their expression, absolutely. But here's where the issue lies. The statue is a very unflattering depiction of an individual who already has very low self-esteem and who is capable of great harm and who is already going to sleep at night knowing that they are the most hated person in the world right now. I mean, historically, I think that the level of hate this person is receiving can be surpassed perhaps only by Hitler and Mussolini. Maybe not even.
People are comparing.
They are comparing.
Pretty well.
Yeah. So when we look at that, we say, on the one hand, this artist has every right. Absolutely. That's their karma. But what is the outcome of the action? Is it teaching this person how to be kind? Is it teaching anybody how to be kind? Is it teaching anybody how to change the world? Is it teaching anybody how to not harm? No. It's really not. It's making a statement for sure. So there's a protester, and this protester is anti-war protester, and so very dedicated to his path of anti-war that he begins an organization, you know, and he pickets down in Washington, D.C. every day, and he talks to people, and eventually a lot of people align with his words, and so he goes from being one person to being hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people, picketing every day, anti-war. Eventually, most of the people fall away. You know, they stay for a while and then they leave. And one day, he's the only one there again. And this person goes up to him and says, like, really, do you think that you're a single person, an individual? You really think you're going to change the world? And he said, no, I don't think I'm going to change the world. But I'm going to keep showing up, and I'm going to keep reminding myself of what it is that I feel in my heart. That way, I am sure the world doesn't change me. So important. You got to do the work. If you don't do the work, then you will be whatever society pushes you to be. You know, you see the old Western films, how they take all the cattle and they get them into a corral, and then they, leading them off to the slaughter, they keep bunching them together until they force them through the little singular walkway. I don't know what that thing is called, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, don't be like that. Because what waits on the other side is violence. What waits on the other side is just being part of the problem. What waits on the other side is a skeleton of the person you actually are. That is lost to unempowerment. That is lost to knowing yourself. That is lost to hope and faith and goodness. So don't do that. Don't go along. Be the odd one out. The one who says, you know what, love matters. So I'm going to love you. I don't care if you like me or not. That's silly. I'm not going to love you because you don't like me. How do I know you're not just having a bad day? You know? How do I know that my holding space for you is not allowing you to heal more quickly than me coming back at you and saying, well, then I'm not going to love you either. You know, think about that. We tell our children, don't be childish like that. But we're childish like that. So if we want to be grown up and spiritual, then it suggests to us that we have to stop being childish. We need to stop being childish and saying, you know, tit for tat. We need to stop being childish and demanding that you be good first. You go first. And then when you do it, I'll do it. Because we will always have an excuse. Why not to? Well, I know you did it, but you didn't do it good enough. You didn't do it exactly the way you said. Came out a little different in the end, so I'm off the hook now. I don't need to bother. And then we walk along, you know, with our peacock feathers high, you know, ego in full bloom, thinking we got something. But the reality is we lose everything. In violence, we lose everything. Everything. Another beautiful story. There was a general who was infamous for his viciousness. I'm just going to read it to make sure I don't lose any of it. He was brutal and act without mercy. He attacked a small village that lay in the path of his army. Before he got there, the people heard he was coming, and so they all ran away, except for one person, a man who sat beneath a tree quietly and calmly. And this general comes in with all his armies and sees the man sitting beneath the tree and goes up to him and he dismounts his horse and he's all tough. He says, "Why are you still here? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know how vicious and mean I am? Don't you know I could pull my sword out right now and put it right through you?" And the man looked at him. He said, "I do know who you are. Do you know who I am? Do you know that I could sit here and just let you do it? No hatred, no malice. So go ahead." And the general, so disturbed, got on his horse and ran away. Why? Because the man was crazy? Because here he is willing to put his life on the line, No, because the man was not violent. And violence cannot fight nonviolence. It is not possible. Violence cannot fight nonviolence. It's impossible. In order for violence to show its quality, it must be met with violence. So think about that next time someone wants to make you a target of their insults and you get the hair on the back of your neck up. Their insults will only live as long as you fight them. But if you just, either meet it with kindness or just don't play the game, then it will be really short-lived. There's a yoga teacher, I can't remember what her name is right now. She's pretty well known, she's like an international teacher. And she's got a big presence on social media. Some of you have probably heard this story before and may know who I'm talking about. She was online and, I don't know, she asked a question or something and people were responding. And this person came on and called her a really negative word, 4 letters, begins with a C. Yeah. And then said some other things to her after that, I don't know. And she very easily could have come back to him and said, "Who do you think you are? Da, 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 da." Instead, what she did was she private messaged him and said, "My God, you must be in so much pain. What can I do? I mean, is there anything I could do to support you?" And the person, went back to her and said, "I have this medical condition and I'm in this just indescribable pain and my insurance isn't paying for my medicine and this is happening and that's happening and I can't get approved for treatment." And she said, "What? That is so ridiculous. Give me a moment." And she went on, do you know who I'm talking about? Yeah. She went on to her Facebook page and to her community, which is like, of course, like thousands upon thousands of people. She said, "Anybody in this area of, I think, Texas, I need to know if there's a chiropractor, a this kind of doctor, and a that kind of doctor who would be willing to do some pro bono work for a friend of mine." Right away, 3, 4, 5, 7 people came forward and said, "Absolutely, give them my number." So she goes back into the private message with this guy, gives him the information. He gets treatment. He feels great. He thanks her publicly. And he gives her permission to share the story. Now, can you imagine? Here is a person living in chronic pain, chronic physical pain. If she had met him with a "Screw you, you're a piece of garbage. How dare you talk to me that way?" How his pain would have went from here to there. But instead, she met him with nonviolence. And she was able to support him. And her community was able to support him in getting the care he needed. And his pain went from here to here. And he apologized for his violence. And learned that people can actually be kind and that insurance companies aren't people. They're companies. So again, just another really great example of how nonviolence changes the world and eradicates violence. But there are 7 billion people in the world. That's a lot of people. We say the deer population is out of control, right? You see 12 deer on the side of the road and it's like, "Oh my God, the deer are populating." So crazy, ridiculous. We're overpopulating, 7 billion of us. Just like in the year 2000, there were 3 or 4 billion, right? Yeah. Go back and look at the numbers. It's really crazy because now we're on this escalation where we're going to be doubling. And I think it's going to be 25 billion by the year 2025. Yeah, it's crazy the numbers that they're calling for. I mean, it can't be held. The earth cannot sustain us. You know, she won't be able to sustain our invasion for much longer. But anyway, there are 7 billion people in the world, and the likelihood of changing all those minds is not probable. But does that mean that we should just throw our hands up and say, to heck with it, and just be violent like the rest of them? No. Because in a world of 7 billion people, and however many other species there are in their numbers, you are a life of up to 100 years. And that life is going to touch innumerable other lives. And you are either going to contribute to their suffering, or you're not. And if you are a believer in Dharma and karma, for every harm you contribute to another life, you will have to resolve that sometime, either in this life or the next one. I don't know about you, but I've kind of gotten my head wrapped around the idea that I'm going to carry as little baggage as possible across the etheric threshold, so that next time maybe I've just got a little backpack to work with, you know, rather than, you know, 2 oversized pieces of luggage, 3 or 4 backpacks, and a couple of cartons that'll be shipped later. Yeah. You know, as little as possible. I'd like that, you know, etheric jump to be really sweet. Like the most graceful of ballet dancers on stage. Can you imagine, can you imagine a ballet dancer at Radio City Music Hall or wherever, and they've got like big pieces of luggage on each arm, and they're trying to make a leap across the stage? That sounds dangerous to me. It sounds pretty violent, actually. And so if jumping from this life into the next with a boatload of baggage is an act of violence to oneself, then what are we even setting ourselves up for as spiritualists if we're not willing to resolve our own violence? I can't resolve Trump's violence. I can't resolve, the subway killer's violence. I can't resolve your violence. I can only resolve my violence. And in doing so, perhaps contribute to your empowerment to do the same. Any questions or comments? Yes, Aslan.
It's not necessarily related to ahimsa, but why are peacocks associated to divinity with symbolism and stuff?
Say that one more time. Why are peacocks associated with divinity?
You were saying about how we ruffle our...
Yeah. So there's the symbolism of the peacock is very diverse, and it really depends upon what lineage you're talking about. But basically, you could say that those beautiful feathers, which are so beautiful, I mean, we collect them, they're so beautiful, But they, when they're in that full bloom, they are the symbol of an ego showing itself off. And when the peacock closes its tail and allows it to drag upon the ground is an indication of humility. It's a symbol of humility. But there's also the other side of that, because every good story has many sides, right? That the beauty of the tail of the peacock is absolutely an expression of divine creation. It's beautiful. It's only when the ego gets in the way that we say, the feather's not good enough on the bird, I want it. So give it to me. It's only when the ego gets in the way that we say, the rose is not good enough on the vine. Let me cut it and put it in a vase. It's only when the ego is in the way that we actually kill the thing that's beautiful in order to try to own it and own its beauty. So there's a few ways to look at it. Yeah. Now we have peacock feathers on our altar, but they were shed naturally and then there was no peacock harmed. Because that does happen. They do shed naturally. So, and they also die naturally. So I have an affinity to insects. I love insects. I just think they're the coolest thing ever. They're amazing, And so some students in the past got me 2 very beautiful encasements. One is the cicada lineage, the cicada bugs, which are related to the lanternfly. And it's just the different species from the largest to the smallest, and they're just in this really beautiful kind of partial nautilus design, And when they gifted it to me, the first thing they said to me was, before you open this, you need to know no bug was harmed. That there's this company that actually, they go hiking in the forests and they find them on the ground dead and they take them, and that's where they get them from. So I was very glad about that. I was like, thank you so much. So there's ways to do things. We don't have to cut the flowers. It's not necessary. We don't have to pluck the feathers. It's not necessary. All things naturally come and go. And if we look, we'll find what it is that we're looking for without having to commit any violence. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, Jen?
I read a book recently where it's written by Matt Kahn. It's called Everything is Here to Help You. And he talks about how we need to birth the ego like a midwife instead of like a doctor, like ripping it, from the womb. And I thought that was really helpful. But his suggestions were that you treat others with raw respect, acknowledge, and love them. And that's been really helpful, and I've been really creative in my responses to people, and it's been very well received when I'm respectful, acknowledge, and love them. The opposite of that, which is ego-related, is the war, which is worry, anticipate, I think it was like reminisce or regret, like that kind of thing. So it's been really...
Ruminate. Oh. Yeah.
So it's been a very freeing way to live, and I find myself more creative in my responses. The other thing is, I've also heard, instead of saying do no harm, to do less harm. Because it's like we cause harm, for me, I get guilty very easily, so I would be like, oh, but I drove here, so I caused some sort of harm. Like you're always doing some sort of harm. But to do less harm is just a different way for me to reframe it.
Absolutely. And even the way we define harm can change. Because when you think about harm and violence, we can say that there is a component of intention there. I intend to harm. I intend to be violent. You don't go to war because you don't intend violence. You go to war because that's exactly what you're intending, When we commit harm, breathing in and out, our nostrils produce nitrous oxide, which kills bacteria that are trying to get into our body to colonize our bodies. That's happening, and most of you don't even know that and have never heard of it before. So therefore, that is not a harmful act because it is not intended. You did not intend for it. The one quality that needs to be present for harm is intention. Yeah, absolutely. So what about people who who commit acts that appear to be unintentional but really cause great harm. Like the drunk driver, who hits a person and, or another car and a family dies. Well, now we need to go to the root. And we need to, on some level, understand that when the person got behind the wheel of the car, it is possible that they had no intention of harming anybody. But when the person picked up the drink, who did they intend to harm? Themselves. And that extrapolates out to whoever else they touch, which is why it's so important to understand that when you intend to harm yourself, the consequence of that will be harming all others in your path. So the first place we need to remedy harm is to self. And then that will naturally expand so that we won't want to hurt anyone else either. Yeah, self-love is so important. Not like self-love, hey, I'm great. All that in a bag of chips too. But self-love, like I have respect for myself, I acknowledge myself, and I welcome myself. Absolutely. Rather than I worry about myself and who I think I am. What was the second one? A for anger? Anticipate. I anticipate I'm going to fail at everything, or I anticipate that I'm going to succeed and people are going to hate me. Yeah. And then R, and what did you say? Ruminate. Yeah, okay, ruminate, which is such a great word. I ruminate over everything, right? I'm ruminating over people's opinions of me. I'm ruminating over, should I have this donut? Should I not have this donut? I'm ruminating over, should I be a vegan, a vegetarian, or a meat eater? I'm ruminating. Ruminating over politics, ruminating over this, ruminating over that. The more we ruminate over anything, the less we are addressing the issue. Make a decision and stay with it. Cause no harm and be that. That's wonderful. Thank you. What's the name of that book?
Everything is here to help you.
Everything is here to help you. It sounds like Wayne Dyer, there's a spiritual solution to everything. Yeah. Absolutely. Any other thoughts today?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm seeing something in our society that I don't quite understand. In the women to 15 to 65 group.
Yeah.
I had 4 of them this week say, this child is very violent toward me. And it's an adult child. But it just seems like something they don't understand and I don't understand, and we're all like,
yeah. So I work with a lot of people spiritually, obviously, and that's something that I also hear a lot about, because I also do a lot of work with at-risk families, and where children are in crisis or the whole family is in crisis. And that's the same thing that I hear from so many moms and some dads, is my child is so violent toward me. And typically, I don't say it in kind of this direct way, but we get to this. Actually, no, your child is not violent to you. Your child is behaving violently because your child is suffering, and we're not getting to the root of what is causing that suffering. You feel you are being attacked because you are personalizing your child's suffering. And you're saying, this burden is too heavy upon my shoulders. I don't deserve this. But the reality is you have a communal karma. You have a family karma. You have a broader community karma, and even a societal and a global karma. And all of those karmas have come together to put this particular child in this particular place at this particular time, bearing the weight of this particular suffering. And the only way that that is going to be remedied is if we get to the root of what's causing it. But the problem in the West right now is that we don't want to get to the root of what's causing it. We just want to cover it up with icing and sprinkles and spirituality. It's true. It is. It's like, well, hey, it's spiritual. Why can't you be okay? No. Actually, the first step in spirituality is a very, very down and dirty, dismal step of acknowledging that suffering exists and that I have a part in that. And then accepting that and doing what I can to strengthen myself and empower myself, which naturally alleviates whatever I'm adding to anybody else's plate. So eventually, as I'm working with parents and with families, what we eventually get to, and this is kind of like the crash course, but what we eventually get to is you need to stop personalizing your child's behavior as being a reflection of who you are as a person, and understand that they have their own suffering going on. And instead of personalizing it and saying, oh my God, every time I walk into the store and this kid acts this way, I'm embarrassed. Or every time the kid walks into the house, I'm afraid. What do you think that kid feels like? It doesn't feel good to be violent. Think back now to the last time that you were so angry you could have killed something. Did that feel good? Did that feel wonderful? Did it leave you feeling like you could run the world? No. It made you want to crawl into a closet somewhere and hide from all of society, because that's so much energy and you don't know what to do with it. And here you have an adult who doesn't know what to do with it. Can you imagine that 7-year-old or that 10-year-old or that 17-year-old who do not have the life experience of the 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old? They definitely don't know what the hell to do with it. So what do they do with it? They lash out at anything and everything because they don't know what else to do with it. And nobody's telling them what to do with it. So it starts with self. But there also has to be a recognition in today's world that things have gotten away from us, and in a really violent way. And our kids are now taking the brunt of it. And it's across the board, really. I mean, it's hard pressed nowadays to really encounter a healthy child. It really, think about it. How sad is that? Remember when you were little, right? Were there healthy kids when you were 7, 8, 10? Do you remember some kid you looked up to and you were like, wow, that kid, not the cool kid, but like somebody who seemed to really have it together? I would suggest that those kids are fewer and far between nowadays. And instead of getting, and please take this with the love that it's meant, instead of becoming more courageous in seeking out a solution to the problem, to the root of the cause, we're just getting more frightened. We're just getting more frightened. And we're just putting more and more layers over our heads and saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. Please don't hurt me. Which is our own spiritual crisis. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's so true. And I don't have all the answers to anything. But what I do know is that we cannot keep sticking our head in the sand. We cannot keep sticking our head in the sand. Marianne Williamson says she's running for president. Part of me says, maybe not, because Obama was wonderful, in my opinion. But they ate him alive, and they stopped him in his tracks. And she is too powerful to be stopped in her tracks, and so is he. So part of me is like, please let's not have a replay, because he could have done so much more had he had the government supporting him as president. And if you don't appreciate him, then that's fine too. That's whatever. But the other side of me says, oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, yes. If you haven't read any of her books, read some of them. She's been a political activist for years. She's no freshman to this entire world of politics at all. But you know what the great thing is that she's a mindfulness leader. And she says it exactly as it is. One of the first things she's calling for is $100 billion in reparations for slavery. And people are saying, what? And she says, yeah, absolutely. She has an interview out on TV. I'm just going to say this for a second. You should all listen to it. Whether you like her or not, agree with her or not, it doesn't matter. But the point that she's making is we look at the rest of the world and condemn people like the Nazis. But Germany has paid reparations of $80 million to Jewish organizations throughout the world. And we're still bitching and moaning that black people want an education.
And we're still systemically holding them back. We're still breaking out of systemic racism that has been rampant, that we don't even feel within our being.
Absolutely.
That we all with white skin participate in.
Absolutely. Germany took down its wall. We want to put one up. I mean, Marianne Williamson. Just listen to or read one of her books. Whether you agree or disagree, there's a lot there to be learned no matter what side of the fence you fall on. And she talks about nonviolence also as being inherent and necessary and getting to the root of what causes the problems in our society, that right now all we're doing is putting icing on a cake that's got too many layers. We're just trying to pretty it up. You know, we need to start stripping it down and getting all the way to the base of things. And when we do that, what we will find is that violence will start naturally falling away as we begin to educate ourselves over what's actually happening. And that's for all sides of the playing field. That's not just for people who are falling on the right side. It's the left side too. And it's the centrists. It's everybody. It's everybody. Nobody is free of responsibility here. Nobody, you know? That's the spiritualist and the religious and the agnostic and the atheist and everybody. It's everybody. We need to start drawing the layers away so that we can see what's actually happening and then come together as a community and some real solutions. True solutions that are not based in violence. And every time that a person of color is inhibited from voting or from getting an education or from getting a job, and every time that a woman is made to feel like crap because she wants to have a baby and a job, or because she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, every time that our opinions cause someone else to feel like less of a person, we are committing an atrocity, an absolute atrocity. We need to stop in our own lives first. And then from there, it'll naturally expand out. So as always, I've gone over. But not by too much this time. There'll be more later. So any other thoughts? Any other questions? Cal?
I just have one. I read or heard a while back that supposedly, you said that when Trump, every night when he goes to sleep, that he knows that he's the most hated person right now in the world. Supposedly there were several psychological, experts, whatever, and they all agree that he has some type of mental, I don't know if you would...
Narcissism.
Yeah, something that he can't even comprehend, or he doesn't even care that if he's hated or not.
So whenever we speak about any person, we need to remember that people do not exist on a singular plane. That there is an ego, there is a superego, there is what we could call spirit, there is a child, there is an elder, there is an ignorant one, and there's a wise one. And his ego is narcissistic. His superego is pretty narcissistic, probably too. But his inner child is probably pretty wounded.
Oh, yeah.
And if you agree that there is also an inner child in there somewhere in the mix, think about a person who has multiple personality disorder. You know, every personality has a voice. And you may just not see the one that's crying. You just may not recognize, because it's not his public face, the one who is saying things to himself and then shutting that voice down, because the ego is so much more powerful and has a mallet. and it's just hammering on the child. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Just be tougher, just be tougher, just be this, just be that. Just show them. Just show them that they can't get to you. Is there one person in this room right now who has never had a moment in their life where you've said to yourself, just toughen up and don't show them that they're getting to you? Point made. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So he is narcissistic. He's textbook narcissistic if you talk to psychologists and psychiatrists. I mean, you know. But does that mean that he doesn't suffer? No, that doesn't mean that. We can't take those types of definitions and say the whole person fits there. No, part of his personality fits there, but not the entire personality. He's redeemable. Oh, yes, he is. He's redeemable. Because if he's not redeemable, neither are we. He's redeemable. Start praying for him. Start praying for his redemption. Sorry, and again, I don't mean to insult anybody's tendencies politically or any other way. But the reality is, you know, Son of Sam was redeemable too. The Sandy Hook killer was redeemable too. The killer in the story was redeemable too. Yeah. And then if you take that the next step and understand or agree or whatever, believe, have faith in this concept of reincarnation, that this is not our only go-around. I pray to God we're all redeemable. Because if the killer in this life comes back as the killer in the next life, then, you know, why bother? Right? I would love to see the person who committed such atrocities in this life come back as a freaking butterfly, you know, or a kind person who helps so many people, or someone who has a humble heart, you know. In this life, maybe he's playing Trump. In the next life, maybe he'll be a great humanitarian. But you know what would be really great? If in the last 10 years of this life he played the great humanitarian. He will not do that if he's hated. It's not likely. So we got to stop hating. We got to stop being violent and empower kindness. Empower him to see that. Empower all of us to see that. Bless you. So let's sit up nice and tall. Did you want to say something, Kathy?
Oh, I didn't really want to take any time for this, but years ago my neighbor raised peacocks, and and they're really noisy. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. That's not even how they sound. And I asked him, I said, why are they so interesting to you? And he said, because in India they can kill cobras and swallow up their venom and not be affected. So it's like they're immortal.
Yeah, there's another one. There you have it.
So I did check, and that is a true story.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, they're beautiful.
But you know I believe everything on the internet.
Do you ever see their dance that they do? So the male opens up his beautiful tail feathers, and then he shakes them all.
Yeah.
And that's just...
Facebook,
Oh,
I just saw a picture of one on Facebook 2 days ago. Unbelievable.
So beautiful.
When he's shaking a little bit, it's
yeah.
amazing.
And then they have ones that have all white feathers.
There's a farm on my way home.
That has one?
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
All their white feathers out. It's so easy.
What do they call that? It's like that mother of pearl kind of a sheen to them. Yeah, so beautiful. Oh. Yeah. So close the eyes. Take a nice breath in, a nice breath out. And take a moment to set an intention to simply be less violent in your own life. When you put your mug of tea down on the table, place it carefully. When you eat your food, take smaller bites. Chew mindfully and appreciate. When you're speaking, breathe. When you're waking up, Open your eyes slowly. Small little actions. Less and less violent. More and more kind. More deeply healed over time. Drawing the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. May all beings everywhere find peace, love, light, and happiness. May all beings know their oneness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste. Thank you all so much for being here today. So good to see and gather with each and every one of you. Wonderful. So enjoy the day. There's so much happening. There's schedules up at the front table. There's a concert. Beloved Aslan is going to be doing a permaculture talk, followed by some arts and crafts. I believe that's the sequence. There's lunch being served, all kinds of wonderfulness. So please do stay and enjoy. I think that there might be some reflexology available. There's chair massage by Dayananda. And yeah, the schedule's up there. Enjoy, everybody. And YTTs, so you are on lunch now, and then at 12 o'clock you'll meet Michelle in the Student Center, I believe that's correct. And then at 2 o'clock, I will see you, but I don't know where yet. So I will reach out to you and let you know where we're going to meet in what room. Yeah, because we want y'all to be warm, and it's a little chilly in this room. So we're figuring it all out. You're very welcome. 14 blankets later, you know.
Okay, at least there's blankets here.
It's true, absolutely. And those are nice blankets, too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.